At 9:20 p.m., my vacuum hummed over marble like it was trying to swallow the silence. The Halcyon's penthouse suite smelled of cedar polish and money. I moved fast, head down, because the schedule said the owner was out until 10 p.m., and I trusted schedules more than people. In this hotel, staff are trained to be air. Trish Mallory, my supervisor, called it the ghost rule. Clean, restock, disappear. Smile too long and you become a story. Look a guest in the eye and you become a target. I learned quickly, because I'm a mom with everything left. My son Liam is 7, small for his age, brave in ways I don't have time to be. He was asleep at Mrs. Caldwell's place across town, recovering from another rough week. My phone sat in my pocket like a live wire, because the wrong buzz could ruin everything tonight. The penthouse belonged to Gavin Cross, the name people whispered like a warning and a prayer. The rules for this suite were printed on my clipboard. Never touch the desk, never open the west closet, never stay past 10:15. I didn't ask why. Asking is how you get noticed. I kept checking my watch, the cheap one with a cracked face. 9:20 became 9:25, then 9:30. Each minute felt loud. I pictured Liam's chest rising and falling and told myself I was doing this for him. For the future I kept promising but never delivering. Then I heard the wrong sound, not the soft click of the service door, but the deep latch of the main entrance. The suite seemed to hold its breath. My hands stopped mid-wipe. The vacuum's hum felt suddenly rude, like it was tattling on me to whoever had just arrived. He stepped in like a shadow that had learned to wear a suit. Tall, broad-shouldered, hair cut neat, eyes the color of winter steel. I'd seen him once in the lobby, moving through people without touching them, and somehow changing the air anyway. Now that air pressed on my lungs. I should have apologized. I should have explained the schedule, the checklist, my exit plan. Instead, my mouth went dry, and my mind went blank except for one question. Is being seen safer than being invisible? Or is it just a different kind of danger? My body answered before pride. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The words came out low and controlled, telling me to come closer, telling me he wanted to show me something. I hated that my feet moved. I hated even more that part of me wanted to understand what he already knew. I followed him out of the suite, past the polished hallway where every painting looked expensive enough to have secrets. He walked ahead without looking back, and somehow I knew he would notice if I hesitated. The hotel above us kept shining, pretending nothing was happening like we were ghosts. He stopped at a plain door I'd always assumed held extra towels and mop heads. Instead of a key, he used a small panel, quick and practiced. The lock clicked, soft as a confession. I felt my stomach turn. What kind of owner hides rooms from his own staff? Down here. The room was windowless and colder than the hallway, lit by a single desk lamp that made everything look sharp. The first thing I heard was electricity, a faint buzzing under the quiet. The second thing I saw was glass and metal and a row of screens, waiting like eyes. Images flickered across them in grids. The lobby chandelier, the elevators, the staff entrance, corners I'd never noticed because I was always rushing. Every hallway, every door, every face, captured and saved. My skin prickled with embarrassment. I had spent months trying to disappear, and this building had been watching. Gavin stood behind me, close enough that I could smell clean soap and something darker, like smoke trapped in fabric. He didn't touch me. He didn't have to. The room itself felt like his hand on my shoulder, steady and heavy. I realized I was holding my breath again anyway. If the hotel had eyes everywhere, what else did it know about me? About Liam? About the calls I never answered in public? I felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with clothes. This wasn't luxury. This was control, undisguised as comfort, and I stood inside it. He spoke again, and I felt the command settle into my bones. Not cruel, just final. He wanted me to look closer, to follow the feed to one corner of the lobby. His finger moved over the controls like he'd done it 1,000 times. I swallowed and leaned in. The screen sharpened. A man in a dark coat paused under the chandelier, turning his head as if he felt the camera. Before I could process why that mattered, Gavin reached for something out of view. The monitors blinked. In my chest, the countdown restarted and knew I was next. Cold light washed over my hands as I stepped farther into the room. The monitors breathed a steady hum, each screen a different slice of the Halcyon. Lobby, elevators, hallways, the staff entrance where I always slipped in like a shadow. I felt my own face heat up, realizing the building had been watching me the whole time. What else had it seen? What did it save? Gavin Cross moved with the same calm he'd carried into his suite, as if nothing in this hidden level could surprise him. He tapped a control and froze the lobby feed on the man in the dark coat. Then he set a manila folder on the desk beneath the lamp. He didn't slide it like a gift. He placed it like evidence. I opened it because my body understood there was no pretending anymore. The photo inside was grainy, pulled from a camera angle that caught the man's profile and the sharp tilt of his jaw. Derek Salazar. Even through pixels, I recognized the way he held himself, like he owned the air around him. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I might be sick. Gavin's gaze stayed on me while he explained, in that low, measured way of his, and that Derek had been inside the hotel twice this week. Not as a guest, not as someone who belonged. He had walked up to the front desk, asked for Maya Carter, and described my shift like it was an appointment. The words made my skin go cold. I'd always told myself the Halcyon was safer than the street. Now the street was standing under the chandelier, looking for me. I tried to swallow my fear down where Liam couldn't ever taste it, but my throat wouldn't cooperate. Gavin indicated the chair. He wanted the whole story, not pieces. I sat because my knees were shaking, and because pretending had already failed. My hands pressed hard against my thighs to keep them still. I told him about Liam. 7 years old, congenital heart condition, the kind of diagnosis that turns your calendar into a battlefield. I told him how I'd patched together rent, groceries, and hospital copays until the numbers stopped adding up. How a woman at work had whispered Derek's name like it was a shortcut. How I borrowed $4,000 and promised myself it was temporary. Temporary lasted exactly 2 months. After that, the calls started. 12:30 at night, my phone buzzing while Liam slept, while Mrs. Caldwell's old radiator clanked in the next room, while I stared at the ceiling and tried to breathe quietly. At first, it was reminders. Then it was pressure. Then it was math that didn't make sense. Interest piled on interest, the debt swelling like a lie. He said I owed more every week, until $12,000 sounded normal. He hinted that a mother could repay in ways a paycheck couldn't. One afternoon outside the train station, he gripped my wrist hard enough to leave a bruise I hid under long sleeves even in summer. I hated myself for hiding it. I hated the world for making hiding feel like survival. When I ran out of words, the room felt smaller. Gavin didn't soften. He didn't offer pity. He listened like a man stacking facts into a weapon. Then he spoke with precision, separating truth from Derek's performance. The interest, he made clear, was fabricated. The operation was predatory and unlicensed. Derek survived because people like me couldn't afford lawyers, and because shame kept us quiet. Hearing it said plainly made my chest ache with anger. It also made me feel less crazy. I couldn't stop wondering why a man like Gavin would care about a housekeeper's debt. He answered before I could ask, glancing at the small framed photo on the shelf. His mother. She had cleaned rooms in a cheap hotel when he was a kid. Someone with power decided she owed more than work. She couldn't fight because she needed the paycheck, and he couldn't fight because he was small. The words were flat, but the meaning wasn't. In his eyes, I saw a promise he'd been carrying for years. He would never watch it happen again. He faced me again and said he wasn't a child anymore. He wasn't offering charity. He was correcting something the world had gotten away with. Derek had walked into his building and made a mistake. Gavin told me he was already moving pieces, already pulling threads, already making sure Derek would stop saying my name. I believed him, not because I wanted to, but because this room existed. Because the hotel had eyes everywhere. Because a man who builds a hidden floor can build protection too. When he opened the door for me, the hallway outside felt different, like the air had shifted. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was seen. And if Gavin Cross had decided I mattered inside his world, then everything about my life was about to change. Quietly at first. The way storms begin before anyone looks up. I could not look away. By the time my alarm went off, my skin still remembered the cold light of that hidden room. I poured cereal into a chipped bowl and kept glancing at my phone like it might bite. Nothing buzzed, but my nerves stayed wired anyway. At 6 in the morning, I clocked in at the Halcyon, walked the service corridor, and told myself to be a ghost. My locker door squealed when I pulled it open, and there they were, brand new black work sneakers sitting on the bottom shelf. Thick soles, clean laces, the kind that cost about $80, the kind I used to stare at through store windows before I learned to keep walking. No note, no signature, just a quiet upgrade that made my throat tighten. Help without a name felt less like a gift and more like a signal that someone knew exactly where my life was hurting. Was being seen protection? Or was it a different kind of danger? Trish Mallory found me in the linen closet and delivered the next change with her usual flat voice. My schedule was being reassigned off late nights and onto days. She called it a management decision, and the way her eyes avoided mine told me not to ask questions. I should have felt only relief, but routine was the one thing I controlled. Then I pictured Liam waiting outside his after-school program with his backpack sliding off one shoulder. And I remembered how many days I arrived too late to catch his first look for me. Day shift meant I could be there at 3:15 in the afternoon, on time like a normal parent. That evening, Cal Rowan appeared by the staff exit as I headed toward the train. He didn't introduce himself. His badge did that, and his posture did the rest. He walked half a step behind me, close enough to block anyone from getting near, far enough that I could still breathe. The street felt the same, but my body didn't. I was safer and more visible at the same time, and I couldn't decide which part scared me more. Inside the hotel, I started noticing things I used to miss. A camera dome above a doorway, a guard who lingered longer near housekeeping, a hush that fell when certain men walked by. Once, near the service elevators, I caught a glimpse of Gavin at the end of a corridor. He didn't come closer. He simply looked at me with that focused attention that made my spine straighten on instinct, like he was measuring the distance between danger and my skin. Then he turned and vanished behind a door I wasn't meant to use. On the 5th day, I volunteered to straighten the lobby flowers because the warmth there helped my hands stop shaking. A man in a gray suit sat near the windows and watched me like he was memorizing the way I moved. When he asked for Maya Carter, he did it with polite confidence that made my stomach sink. I kept my face blank and let my voice stay small, the way the ghost rule demanded. I told him I was new, that I didn't know names, and I watched his smile sharpen as if he was testing how close he could push. Cal Rowan stepped in beside the chair, and the light shifted because his body blocked it. He didn't touch the man, didn't raise his voice, just stood there like a locked door. The suit recalculated and left with his dignity intact, which meant he would be back. My hands shook so hard I had to hide in the staff bathroom and breathe against cold tile until my heart stopped sprinting. I kept thinking about how easy it was for him to say my name in public, like he owned it. My phone buzzed once, and an unknown number delivered a short note that told me Gavin had seen the lobby moment almost as it happened. No comfort, no questions, just the implication that it wouldn't happen again. That night, I climbed the stairs to my apartment and tried to walk quietly so my neighbors wouldn't notice the tremor in my legs. Mrs. on Bernice Caldwell had Liam asleep already, his dinosaur book folded on his chest, his lashes resting like nothing in the world could reach him. I tucked the blanket higher, kissed his forehead once, and let myself believe we had survived the worst. Then I saw the envelope on the floor outside my door. No stamp, no name, just my apartment number written in block letters. Inside was a small printed photo of Liam at the playground, taken from across the street, the kind of distance a stranger uses when they don't want to be caught. My knees went weak, and a cold anger moved through me like electricity. Derek Salazar wasn't just hunting me anymore. He had moved to my child, and I knew I was going to need answers from the parts of this building that don't exist. If Gavin wanted me to follow, I was ready to go. At 10:10 at night, my shift ended, but I did not head for the train. A plain note waited in my locker. No name, only a floor number that did not exist. My throat tightened. Liam's photo still burned in my pocket. I followed the instruction anyway right then. Cal Rowan held the service elevator door and watched the hall like he expected teeth to appear. Gavin Cross stood beside the panel, silent, already deciding for all of us. The car dropped past basement level, past a final beep, into a smooth stop that felt deliberate, not mechanical anymore. The doors opened on polished concrete and recessed lights, too clean for a basement and too quiet for a hotel. No pipes, no leaks, no smell of bleach. This was a place built to be hidden. My footsteps sounded wrong, and I wondered who else had ever walked here before. And Gavin led me to the last door. Inside, the air changed. A desk lamp cast honey light over shelves of books with cracked spines. A record player sat in the corner like someone still used it. On the wall hung one framed photo of a tired woman with kind eyes. I recognized her as his mother without being told. The picture did not match the rumors. Gavin indicated a chair, not kindly, not cruelly, simply steady. My pride wanted to stand, but my legs obeyed first. Would I accept help from a man everyone feared if it meant Liam lived? He set a folder in front of me. I opened it and saw Liam's name, Liam Carter, printed on hospital forms that should have been locked behind insurance walls. There were scans, notes, a surgeon's schedule, and an appointment in 2 weeks. My hands went numb as I read twice. At the bottom of the estimate, in the price line was slashed through with a hard pen stroke. Next to it were 3 words in a different hand. Taken care of. I blinked, sure I was misreading. Then I reread, and my throat closed like a fist around air for once. I did not collapse. I sat very still, because if I moved, the relief might knock me flat. Tears came anyway, hot and embarrassed, the kind you hate because they show how desperate you have been. I covered my mouth and listened to my own breathing, ragged and alive again. Gavin did not reach for me. He slid a glass of water across the desk and waited, as if patience was a form of control. The lamp hummed. The record player stayed silent. In that quiet, I felt safety that did not demand performance. Safety that let me be messy. When I tried to push the folder back, he stopped me with a look. The message was clear. This was not charity. It was also not a debt. He was not Derek Salazar. He would never circle back later with a price. Refusing would not make me noble, only cornered. Then the tone shifted. He needed something from me. Not my gratitude, not my silence, not obedience. He needed my voice. He needed my face. He explained that paper trails do not sway juries the way a mother with hands trembling does. Records can be doubted. People are proof there. He told me he was building more than a warning. He was building a case. Derek was the front door. Once it opened, everyone behind it would panic. I thought of Liam and felt relief drain into dread. Could I carry my truth into court and keep my child safe? My first instinct was to refuse, to hide behind the ghost rule again. But hiding had brought Derek to my door anyway. Gavin's power was real, disciplined, and already in motion. I could feel it in the cameras, in Cal's footsteps, in the way the schedule had changed without explanation. He gave me a simple choice, framed without pressure. I could walk away and keep cleaning rooms until Derek found another angle, or I could stand up and help end it. He did not promise comfort, he promised outcome. The difference mattered. Comfort fades. Outcomes protect. My son deserved outcomes. When I finally stood, my legs felt steadier, like grief had been replaced by a task. Gavin opened the door and let me leave without escorting me. Another boundary. Another sign he respected my agency. In the corridor, I realized the building above us was hosting guests who knew nothing. I walked back to the elevator carrying two futures. One was Liam's appointment finally real. The other was my own face on a witness stand, telling strangers about midnight calls and predatory math. I understood what agreeing would mean. Derek would not be the only enemy. Someone cleaner would notice. As the elevator climbed, I pictured the lobby man's polite smile and felt fear sharpen. If predators could hide under chandeliers, what else hid behind campaign posters and lapel pins? The thought tasted like metal. I wiped my cheeks, inhaled, and understood my next step would change everything for good. I left the hidden office carrying Liam's folder like it was glass, and the elevator ride up felt too bright. Relief kept trying to bloom, but fear kept stepping on it. Being helped meant being seen. In my world, visibility had never been free, and it felt like a spotlight. Gavin stayed behind the desk, calm as a locked door, and laid out the first truth. Derek Salazar was not the top. He was a mouthpiece, a collector of desperation. I pictured a spider web stretched over Chicago, and I realized I had been stuck to one strand all along. The man who held the web wore a pin on his lapel and smiled on television. Councilman Everett Crow. I had seen him at bus stops on posters promising affordable housing, safe streets, help for working parents. Now I learned he funded loans like Derek's through shells hidden behind charities. My anger arrived fast, hotter than shame. Crow shook hands at community centers while women like me counted quarters for laundry. He gave speeches about dignity while his money turned dignity into collateral. I kept thinking of Liam's small chest and the way I lied to him every single night. Derek had started with $4,000 and a friendly voice. Then the numbers warped. Interest stacked like bricks until he said $12,000 with a straight face. I had felt stupid for letting it happen. Gavin made me see it was designed that way to trap people who could not afford delay. Crow had tried to buy the Halcyon, not with a fair offer, but with pressure dressed as negotiation. Gavin refused. After that, Crow's people started leaning on the hotel. Inspections, permits, threats that never left fingerprints. One night, someone Gavin trusted ended up hospitalized, and the message was to him. I expected revenge talk, the kind that ends in headlines and bodies. Instead, Gavin spoke like a strategist. He wanted it clean. Evidence first, official channels. He explained that Crow's lawyers would poison anything touched by Gavin's name. The case had to stand alone, or Crow would walk smiling again. That was where I came in. Gavin had files, camera footage, bank trails, and messages Derek thought were private. But a jury believes a face more than a spreadsheet. A mother saying what it cost her to answer a phone at 12:30 at night. My face, my voice too. Every plan ran through Liam in my head. If I testified, what would retaliation look like? A stranger near his school? A note under our door? My stomach turned because I knew Derek's world didn't fight fair. Gavin didn't promise comfort. He promised protection layers, and I clung to idea. I thought about staying quiet, about letting other people fight. Then I remembered the photo of Liam under my door and how my silence had bought me nothing. Who is more dangerous? The man who threatens you openly, or the one who smiles on camera? Crow had both faces too. I told Gavin I would do it, not because I trusted the system, but because I trusted my own record of survival. I would speak with facts, not feelings, even if my hands shook. Fear had driven my life for too long. Now I would drive Liam and myself finally. Walking out of that hidden level, I felt the hotel above me like a mask. Guests laughed in velvet chairs while I carried a war in my pocket. I wondered how many people in Chicago were trapped in Crow's web and didn't even know his name or to escape it. At 6 in the morning the next day, I clocked in and kept my eyes moving. If someone inside housekeeping was leaking, they were close enough to touch my life. Trish called me into a supply room, her voice lower than usual, and the fear in her eyes was new. She told me, carefully, that another housekeeper had been asking questions about my new schedule. Not management questions. Personal ones. When I said Liam's name in my head, my pulse jumped. The hunt was inside the building that trained us to be invisible. Someone was watching the ghosts from close. I thanked Trish with a nod I barely felt and went back to my cart. My hands did not shake. They moved with purpose, pulling out my notebook, checking call logs, writing dates, building a timeline. If truth was the only weapon I had, I would sharpen it every day. On my break, I sat in the staff stairwell and pictured a courtroom, strangers judging my life like a spreadsheet. Would I still speak if someone threatened Liam again? I would, because silence had nearly killed us. Cal Rowan passed the doorway. A reminder that protection was forming around me. That evening, my phone buzzed with an instruction to meet downstairs, and my heart answered before my mind. I tucked Liam's photo and the medical folder into my bag. Somewhere above us, Crow's world smiled. Somewhere, someone had been asking about me. Tomorrow, I would start practicing the truth loud. After Trish pulled me into the supply room and warned me someone was asking about my schedule, I stopped pretending the danger lived outside the hotel. It was in the linen carts, in the break room smiles, in the way a coworker could glance at my clipboard for half a second. I went home that night and laid everything on my kitchen table like I was building a case against my own fear. My phone log, my pay stubs, the folded photo of Liam, the folder Gavin had given me. And I didn't know who the leak was, but I knew what they wanted. They wanted me quiet. I bought a cheap spiral notebook and turned it into a timeline. I wrote 12:30 at night beside every call that woke me up. I wrote the day Derek first mentioned interest, the day he changed the number, the day it jumped toward $12,000 like it was nothing. I added the lobby sighting at the Halcyon, the gray suit man, the way Cal Rowan stepped in without touching him. I saved screenshots, then saved them again to a cloud account Mrs. Caldwell's grandson helped me set up. It felt paranoid until I remembered the photo under my door. Then it felt like parenting. At work, I treated every hallway like it had ears. I kept my phone locked, my notebook tucked under cleaning rags, and my eyes trained on reflections in polished doors. Like if someone in housekeeping was feeding Derek information, they didn't need to love him. They only needed to be scared of him, or paid by him. I started recording short voice memos on my break, repeating the same facts in the same order until my tongue stopped tripping. I pictured a courtroom where Crow's lawyer would try to make me sound emotional, unstable, greedy. Would I still speak if they hinted Liam could pay the price? I had to, because silence had already cost us too much. Truth, I realized, is not brave when it's shouted once. It's brave when it's practiced, until it could not bend. Gavin brought me back to the hidden level 2 nights later. He didn't waste words. He sat me down, slid a blank sheet between us, and made me walk through the story from the first $4,000 to the last camera frame. Each time my voice thinned at the memory of Derek's grip on my wrist, Gavin stopped the process with a lifted hand and waited until I could breathe again. He didn't soothe me, he trained me. Dates, sequence, what happened before and after. He kept shaving emotion away until what remained was clean fact, the kind that could survive cross-examination. At home, I practiced out loud while I did the things Liam thought were normal. I packed his lunch, cut grapes in half, and repeated the timeline under my breath like multiplication tables. I folded laundry and set alarms for medication times, then tested my voice in the mirror to make sure it didn't wobble. At 8 at night, I called Mrs. Caldwell's apartment, listened to Liam describe dinosaurs with a bandage still taped to his arm, and answered with a calm I had to manufacture. When I hung up, I let my hands shake in private, then wrote another line in the notebook. Near midnight, Gavin took me to the roof. The city spread out below, glittering and careless, and for a moment the whole fight felt small and endless at the same time. He stood beside me, not close enough to crowd me, close enough that I knew I wasn't alone. I noticed how tired he looked when he thought no one was watching, how grief can live inside a man who controls everything else. We didn't talk about feelings. The silence was the point. In that quiet, I understood something that scared me. Being protected didn't make me weak. It made me possible. 2 days later, I walked into Liam's after-school program to pick him up at 3:15 in the afternoon, and the receptionist handed me a note that hadn't been there yesterday. No signature. Just a warning wrapped in polite words, telling me to stop talking to people who asked questions. My vision narrowed. I smiled for Liam anyway, took his backpack, and walked him home as if nothing had happened. Inside my chest, fear burned down into something colder. Whoever wrote that note had reached into my child's world. That was a line. That was war. The surgery was only days away, and every mile between home and the hospital felt like a countdown. On the walk back from the corner store, I noticed a sedan idling too long at the curb, its headlights off even though the street was dim. A man sat inside, still as patience. When I crossed, the car rolled forward at the same pace, never quite passing. I didn't see his face, but my body recognized the threat the way it recognizes smoke. Nico Penn, Derek's collector, who had found my neighborhood again, and the clock in my head started ticking louder. After Trish pulled me into the supply room and warned me someone was asking about my schedule, I stopped pretending the danger lived outside the hotel. It was in the linen carts, in the break room smiles, in the way a coworker could glance at my clipboard for half a second. I went home that night and laid everything on my kitchen table like I was building a case against my own fear. My phone log, my pay stubs, the folded photo of Liam, the folder Gavin had given me. I didn't know who the leak was, but I knew what they wanted. They wanted me quiet. I bought a cheap spiral notebook and turned it into a timeline. I wrote 12:30 at night beside every call that woke me up. I wrote the day Derek first mentioned interest, the day he changed the number, on the day it jumped toward $12,000 like it was nothing. I added the lobby sighting at the Halcyon, the gray suit man, the way Cal Rowan stepped in without touching him. I saved screenshots, then saved them again to a cloud account Mrs. Caldwell's grandson helped me set up. It felt paranoid until I remembered the photo under my door. Then it felt like parenting. At work, I treated every hallway like it had ears. I kept my phone locked, my notebook tucked under cleaning rags, and my eyes trained on reflections in polished doors. If someone in housekeeping was feeding Derek information, they didn't need to love him. They only needed to be scared of him or paid by him. I started recording short voice memos on my break, repeating the same facts in the same order until my tongue stopped tripping. I pictured a courtroom where Crow's lawyer would try to make me sound emotional, unstable, greedy. Would I still speak if they hinted Liam could pay the price? I had to, because silence had already cost us too much. Truth, I realized, is not brave when it's shouted once. It's brave when it's practiced. Until it could not bend. Gavin brought me back to the hidden level 2 nights later. He didn't waste words. He sat me down, slid a blank sheet between us, and made me walk through the story from the first $4,000 to the last camera frame. Each time my voice thinned at the memory of Derek's grip on my wrist, Gavin stopped the process with a lifted hand and waited until I could breathe again. He didn't soothe me. He trained me. Dates, sequence, what happened before and after. He kept shaving emotion away until what remained was clean fact, and the kind that could survive cross-examination. At home, I practiced out loud while I did the things Liam thought were normal. I packed his lunch, cut grapes in half, and repeated the timeline under my breath like multiplication tables. I folded laundry and set alarms for medication times, then tested my voice in the mirror to make sure it didn't wobble. At 8 at night, I called Mrs. Caldwell's apartment, listened to Liam describe dinosaurs with a bandage still taped to his arm, and answered with a calm I had to manufacture. When I hung up, I let my hands shake in private, then wrote another line in the notebook. Near midnight, Gavin took me to the roof. The city spread out below, glittering and careless, and for a moment, the whole fight felt small and endless at the same time. He stood beside me, not close enough to crowd me, close enough that I knew I wasn't alone. I noticed how tired he looked when he thought no one was watching, how grief can live inside a man who controls everything else. We didn't talk about feelings. The silence was the point. In that quiet, I understood something that scared me. Being protected didn't make me weak. It made me possible. 2 days later, I walked into Liam's after-school program to pick him up at 3:15 in the afternoon, and the receptionist handed me a note that hadn't been there yesterday. No signature, just a warning wrapped in polite words, telling me to stop talking to people who asked questions. My vision narrowed. I smiled for Liam anyway, took his backpack, and walked him home as if nothing had happened. Inside my chest, fear burned down into something colder. Whoever wrote that note had reached into my child's world. That was a line. That was war. The surgery was only days away, and every mile between home and the hospital felt like a countdown. On the walk back from the corner store, I noticed a sedan idling too long at the curb, its headlights off even though the street was dim. A man sat inside, still as patience. When I crossed, the car rolled forward at the same pace, never quite passing. I didn't see his face, but my body recognized the threat the way it recognizes smoke. Nico Penn, Derek's collector, had found my neighborhood again, and the clock in my head started ticking louder. Saturday night felt too gentle for what we'd survived. Liam lay propped on pillows, his bandage hidden under soft cotton, while I read his dinosaur book and pretended my hands weren't shaking again tonight. The clock on the microwave said 9:40 at night, and the radiator clicked like a metronome. When the heavy knock hit the building's front door, my chest tightened before my brain formed words. My phone buzzed immediately, unknown number, as if the knock had summoned it. I answered because silence can be dangerous, and a man's voice turned smooth when he mentioned Liam by name so calmly. I understood who it was without hearing a last name. Nico Penn, Derek Salazar's collector, the one who never raised his voice because he didn't need to. He offered a choice that wasn't one. He made it clear I could come downstairs alone and talk, or he would come upstairs and talk where Liam could hear. My fear tried to flood me, but something colder rose first instead. I looked at Liam's face, flushed with sleep and healing, and I decided no one was using my child as leverage. I told him I was getting water, then stepped into the hall quietly. My fingers found Gavin Cross's number with the speed of panic. When he answered, his calm steadied the air around me. I told him Nico was downstairs, and my voice stayed controlled somehow anyway. Gavin's response came like instructions in a fire drill. Cal Rowan was 3 minutes away, and I was not to open the door or go downstairs. The certainty in that plan felt like armor. I locked every bolt, then dragged Liam's dresser across the apartment door, wood scraping the floor in a sound I hoped he wouldn't remember. I returned to his room and kept the book open. Liam blinked up at me, trusting, and asked for the part about the T-Rex again. I nodded and began reading, shaping my voice into normalcy, while my heart hammered like it wanted out badly. Between sentences, I listened for footsteps on the stairwell, for the elevator, for a key in the hallway. The seconds stretched until they felt unreal, and I counted them without moving my lips once. Downstairs, voices rose, then dropped, the way people talk when they think fear makes you obedient. Liam's breathing stayed even beside me. I kept reading about extinction events and pretended my hands were steady. 3 minutes can be longer than 3 years when you are waiting for help. I pictured Cal's boots, Gavin's cold focus, and every camera in the Halcyon turning toward my building like a searchlight. Then the hallway outside my door went silent, a heavy silence that felt deliberate. My phone buzzed again with a short message implying it was handled. I didn't breathe fully until I heard steps. Cal Rowan stood there when I moved the dresser back. His breathing was elevated, and a small split marked one knuckle. He kept his voice low, explaining Nico was gone and would not return. I asked how he could be sure, and Cal answered with certainty learned from surviving violent men. He reminded me Gavin does not make promises he cannot keep, then scanned the hallway for exits. When Cal left, I sat on the kitchen floor and let the shaking come. Then I wiped my face and opened my notebook. I wrote Saturday night, 9:40, call, threat to Liam, response. I saved screenshots of the number, labeled a voice memo with the time, and copied my notes into a place online. It wasn't drama, it was armor. If they wanted confusion, I chose order. Liam slept through all of it, which felt like a miracle and an accusation. I stared at his chest rising, and I promised him I would not let fear make decisions for us again. The next morning, Cal met me outside to walk to the train as if nothing had happened, but his eyes kept checking corners. I realized protection is not one dramatic moment. It is repetition. At work, the lobby gleamed and guests laughed, unaware of the siege in my apartment. I wondered who had pointed Nico toward my door. How do you trust when danger has a key today? Cal later confirmed what my gut already knew. Nico had not stumbled onto me by chance. Someone fed him crumbs, a shift change, an address, a time. The thought made my hands go cold. I wanted to rip through the roster and demand names, but Gavin's voice echoed in my head. Keep it clean, keep it official, keep it provable. If we moved wrong, Crow's web would tighten. That night, I updated my notebook again, adding Cal's warning about breadcrumbs. I backed up files, set passwords, and mapped my next steps like routes on a bus line. Fear could not drive now. Before bed, I checked on Liam. He slept with the dinosaur book open on his chest, safe for the moment. I stared at our door and understood tomorrow would demand proof, not hope anymore. After the Saturday night knock, my apartment stopped feeling like shelter and started feeling like a scene that could be revisited. I wrote everything down while Liam slept. 9:40 at night, unknown number, Nico Penn's voice, my own pulse. I saved the call log, named the voice memo, and backed it up twice. Cal Rowan's warning kept echoing. Nico did not find me by luck. Someone fed him crumbs. By late afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message that wasn't comfort, only direction. Gavin Cross wanted me ready. Derek Salazar and Councilman Everett Crow were meeting tonight at a restaurant that charged more for a glass of water than I spent on groceries. The meeting mattered because Crow never met anyone without a reason, and Derek never showed his face without collecting. Gavin explained it in clean steps, like he was laying down tiles for me to walk across. The district attorney's contact had a surveillance team in place. They were waiting for the moment Derek handed Crow what he always handed him: proof of profit. Money trails, text chains, shell transfers, all the invisible veins that kept the city's smile alive. Tonight was when those veins could be pinched hard enough to show blood in daylight. Was I ready for the city to see what I had lived? My part was tomorrow morning. I would give a recorded statement to the DA's office, not to Gavin, not to anyone in his circle. It had to be official, clean, and boring in the way truth becomes dangerous. Dates, times. The $4,000 loan, the fabricated climb toward $12,000. The 12:30 at night calls. The photo under my door. Nico at my building. No drama, no guesses, only what I could swear. Protection would be assigned through official channels, separate from Gavin's own people, because Crow's lawyers would try to stain anything that looked like him. Then Gavin delivered the part that felt like the floor dropping out again. His involvement would end after tonight. He had already given the DA everything he could without poisoning the case. And once it was in their hands, it was no longer his. The words should have sounded practical. Instead, they sounded like the moment a door closes and you realize the hallway is cold. Would I still testify if it meant the one person who made me feel less alone had to disappear? I wanted to argue, to ask why the world always punished the people who tried to do right. But Liam was in the next room, and I could hear his soft breathing through the wall. I swallowed the protest and chose the only thing that had ever protected him. Action. I told myself this was not abandonment. This was strategy. If the case had to be clean, then I would be clean. I would speak like a mother and a witness, not a victim. I would let the facts do the shouting. All evening I kept my curtains closed and my notebook open. Cal checked the hallway twice, and then left me with a reminder to call if anything felt wrong. I didn't know who to trust in the building, or at work, or in city government. Crow had built a network that looked like charity and felt like a trap. How do you fight a system designed to look respectable when you are just one tired woman with a pen? At 11 at night, the local news finally ran the story. I watched from the couch with the volume low, my hand resting on Liam's doorframe like a promise. The reporter stood outside the restaurant, lights flashing behind her. Agents guided Derek Salazar out in handcuffs, his face twisted with fury. And for once, the cameras did not look away. A second clip showed Councilman Everett Crow leaving a townhouse with federal agents at his shoulder, his expressions still polished, still practiced, as if he believed he could smile through anything. I felt something loosen inside me, a knot I'd carried for months. Safe, I realized, is a sensation, not a place. But relief can be frightening when you're used to bracing. My body didn't know how to rest. I kept thinking of Crow's friends, of Derek's people, of Nico's threat downstairs. Arrests were headlines, not shields. Tomorrow morning my statement would turn fear into paper, and paper into consequence finally. When the segment ended, my phone stayed dark. No message from Gavin. No update. Just the hum of my refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic. I checked the hallway peephole, then checked it again, embarrassed by my own fear. Tomorrow morning I would sit in an office and let a stranger record my life into evidence, and I would do it without his shadow at my back. And I told myself he was doing what he had to do, that disappearing was part of keeping the case clean. Still, the absence felt like a new kind of threat, a blank space where danger could hide. I stared at Liam's sleeping face and waited for the next sound. 2 days after the arrests, I sat in a small office at the district attorney's building and gave my recorded statement. No speeches, no comfort, just a red light and my own voice. When it ended, my lungs finally expanded, as if I had been holding my breath for months. Liam's recovery became my new clock. Medication alarms, gentle walks, homework at the kitchen table. I learned to smile without flinching when my phone buzzed. Cal Rowan stayed close, but at a distance that kept the protection official. Safe started to feel like repetition, not celebration in the early mornings. Going back to the Halcyon was strange. I still pushed my cart, still folded towels, still kept my eyes down around guests. But my shoulders sat differently, like I owned my own name. Trish watched me with a careful respect, and coworkers lowered their voices when I passed through there. After the headline faded, the aftershock arrived in small ways. My landlord suddenly wanted to inspect the apartment twice in 1 week. A neighbor asked questions with too much curiosity. At work, someone hinted my hours might change again. It felt like the city was still watching from behind windows. I looked for Gavin everywhere I used to sense him. The end of a hallway, the corner near the elevators, the shift in air. Days passed without a glimpse. I told myself it was strategy, but my nerves read it as abandonment. What if protection disappears once cameras are off? I started building safety like a habit, double-checking locks, walking Liam to school, not letting him wander ahead, saving every letter from the hospital, every message from officials. I stopped thinking of safety as a finish line. It was a pattern, and patterns required maintenance, like systems in winter. 1 month later, on a Tuesday, I left the staff entrance at 6:30 in the evening. The air was warm, the sky still holding color. I was thinking about dinner and Liam's homework when I saw Gavin leaning against a car, hands in his coat pockets, watching me approach. He did not apologize for disappearing. He simply indicated the sidewalk, and I understood he wanted me beside him. We walked 3 blocks without talking, and the silence felt different than before. It was no longer a test. It was weight, carried parallel. I realized I trusted the quiet now. He stopped on a quieter street lined with brownstones and trees. One building had a garden and a door, modest but cared for. He explained it belonged to a friend who rented units. 2nd floor, 2 bedrooms, bright light. My mind snagged on word bright, as if it was suspicious. He pointed out the practical things first. A radiator that worked, windows that locked, a landlord who answered calls. The neighborhood had a school program for kids with medical needs 3 blocks away. Hearing that, I pictured Liam running without me counting his breaths. My chest hurt in a way. He framed the rent as market rate, not mercy. He said my paycheck could handle it, and a raise was coming. I did not know the raise. That made me dizzy. It was not romance. It was logistics, dignity in numbers. Could I accept help when it was called fairness? Gratitude hit me like warmth, disorienting. I kept expecting an invoice, a catch, a future demand. Instead, there was only a door I could afford and a route to a safer school. I thanked him without embellishment because big words felt fragile. My voice stayed quiet, but it was honest. I asked what Liam would say if he knew why we were here. He would care about windows that locked and a radiator that worked, not reputations. I thought of his laughter, of Mrs. Caldwell's relief, and I felt resistance soften. If safety is a pattern, this was one stitch. When I turned toward Gavin, streetlight caught shadows under his eyes. His coat hung right, but his posture looked heavier than before, as if he had been carrying weight while I learned to breathe. I wondered what battles he fought since the arrests, and whether helping me had cost allies. He handed me a key card and stepped back, letting me choose. The gesture was simple, but it felt like respect. I tucked it into my pocket with Liam's papers and felt the night settle. Hope was here, but it came with a question. What did it take from him? I walked home with the new address in my pocket. Mrs. Caldwell listened while I explained the plan in careful pieces, and she nodded like she already believed we deserved better. Liam noticed my smile and asked why. I told him we might move somewhere warm, somewhere quiet, somewhere safe. The day at the Halcyon, the hallways looked the same, but I was different. I no longer tried to disappear. I carried my notebook, my documents, my future. Yet every time I remembered Gavin's eyes, My relief sharpened into worry. If safety is a pattern, who keeps the protector safe? On the first morning in the brownstone, the radiator hummed like a promise. At 8:10 in the morning, Liam padded across the new floor in socks, testing the quiet, and I watched him like he might disappear if I blinked. The window locks clicked firm, not loose, and that small sound loosened something in my chest. I filled the fridge slowly. Milk, apples, leftovers in mismatched containers. Liam taped a dinosaur drawing to the door with crooked pride. I kept touching the doorknob, surprised it didn't feel like a threat. For once, home smelled of soap, not fear, tonight. Mrs. Bernice Caldwell arrived with a pot of chicken soup and a look that dared the world to argue. She set bowls on the table as if she had always lived here. Cal Rowan showed up too, awkward in a clean sweater, carrying a bag of rolls like it was evidence. Liam asked him to draw a dinosaur, and Cal tried, tongue pressed to his cheek, making everyone laugh. Even Trish Mallory stopped by with extra pantry staples, then pretended it was just housekeeping leftovers. The room felt ordinary, and that ordinariness was the rarest gift. I let myself believe. Later, when the dishes were stacked and Liam had fallen asleep on the couch, the doorbell rang once, soft and controlled. Gavin Cross stood in the hall with a paper bag of groceries and the same stillness I'd come to recognize. Up close, the exhaustion showed. A faint bruise of shadow under his eyes. A tightness in his jaw like he was holding back a storm. He didn't step inside until I nodded. That restraint mattered. He asked with his silence how we were doing, and I answered by letting him in. My hands stopped shaking when the latch clicked. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small book with a worn spine, soft at the corners from years of being carried. I recognized it from the framed photo downstairs, the way his mother's presence seemed to follow him. He didn't announce it as sentimental. He presented it like a tool. In my mind, I heard him admitting she used to read from it when the world felt too big and he was too young to fight back. I held the book, surprised by how light it was. Like it carried shelter instead of weight, somehow. Tonight. I flipped to a page marked by a folded corner and scanned the lines without reading them aloud. Only a few words stood out, something about shelter and choosing again. The rest I absorbed as meaning. Protection is not one dramatic rescue. It is a daily act of turning toward what's fragile. I thought of the new locks, the day shift, Cal's silent escort, the surgery appointment, the way Gavin never asked for payment. The passage made me realize safety can be built like a habit if someone keeps showing up. And if I also choose it, it holds too. I used to think being rescued would feel like fireworks, but this felt like steadiness, like someone holding a door while I carried my own boxes. Gavin's boundaries were the proof. He stayed present without crowding, protective without demanding, serious without making me feel small. I told myself I wasn't a project in his hands. I was a person rebuilding in my own time. The strange tenderness between us lived in pauses, in the way he watched Liam's breathing, in the way I finally stopped apologizing for needing help. Would you trust devotion that arrives quietly, without speeches, every day? While Gavin washed his hands in the kitchen sink, I noticed a neat stack of envelopes tucked beside the toaster, all addressed to me. They weren't bills. They were copies. A voided loan agreement, a restraining order request, confirmation numbers, and a letter stating Derek Salazar could not contact me or Liam. My pulse slowed as I read the headings. This wasn't one favor. It was layers, filed through offices with seals and signatures, built to hold up under scrutiny. Gavin had erected a legal wall around us while I was still learning to breathe, so the drama could end. I returned the papers to their stack and held the poetry book against my chest, understanding the shape of what he'd done. Cameras, escorts, court filings, shift changes, and a home with locks that worked. It wasn't romance. It was a blueprint. Outside, the street was quiet, but inside my head, the noise finally softened. I thought of December coming, of Sunday mornings that might be ordinary, of Liam laughing without me counting his breaths. Real safety looked like this: plans, people, and a door that closes for warmth, not fear. I was ready to let the story rest now. 6 months later, on a Sunday morning in December, the brownstone is warm before the sun fully clears the rooftops. The radiator hums steady, not sputtering, and the windows lock with a click I still check out of habit. Outside, Chicago looks soft under winter light, but inside my kitchen smells like coffee and clean laundry. For the first time, my body wakes without bracing. I listen to the quiet and realize it is mine. Liam sits cross-legged on the rug, drawing dinosaurs with serious concentration, his cheeks pink from health instead of fever. He is 7 now, and he talks about recess like it is a normal right. On the refrigerator, his sketches crowd around a clinic photo from last week, him grinning with a paper stethoscope. I keep that picture where I can see it, proof that we made it through. Every morning, it steadies me again. Mrs. Bernice Caldwell drops by after church with a container of cornbread and a look that says she still counts us as her own. Cal Rowan texts when he is nearby, always short, always reliable, and sometimes Liam forces him into a board game he pretends to hate. Even Trish Mallory sends a holiday card from the Halcyon, her handwriting softer than her voice. The circle is small, but it holds. We are not alone. My phone buzzes on the counter and the screen shows Gavin's name like a steady landmark. His message is simple. He is downstairs with coffee and he brought something for Liam. I smile before I mean to, because my face still forgets it can do that. I glance at the locked window, then at my son, and I feel gratitude settle instead of suspicion. After everything, I check the latch, but I no longer panic. I lift Liam onto the sill cushion so he can look without pressing his face to the glass. Down on the sidewalk, Gavin waits with 2 cups and a small wrapped box under his arm. He does not posture or scan the street like a show. He just stands there, patient, looking up when he senses us. Liam lights up and starts bouncing, whispering that Gavin brought him a present again. I laugh, almost surprised. When the buzzer sounds, I go down and open the building door, then bring him up before the cold can follow. Gavin steps into my kitchen and sets the coffee on the counter like it belongs here. He kneels to hand Liam the box, waiting while tiny fingers tear the tape. I watch him choose patience over control, and it feels like the truest kind of strength. No speeches, just presence, repeated until it holds. I used to imagine happy endings as loud things, like fireworks over the lake. This one is quiet. School lunches packed, medicine taken on time, paperwork filed, doors locked, and a man who shows up anyway. Gavin's name still makes some people flinch, but Liam only sees the person who reads him stories and remembers his favorite dinosaurs. Maybe that is what healing looks like. I ask myself if safety is earned or chosen daily. They called Gavin a monster because they were afraid of what he could do. The real monsters wore polished smiles and public titles, and they fed on mothers who could not afford delay. Councilman Crow looked clean on camera, and that was the trick. I learned that protection is not violence. It is boundaries, documentation, witnesses, and community that refuses to look away. Power can destroy, but it can also shield. That is my lesson. On the counter, the worn poetry book rests beside Liam's new drawing, old words, and new life-sharing space. I think of the night I cleaned a suite at 9:20 p.m. and believed invisibility was safety. Now I know safety is built, brick by brick, choice by choice. I am grateful, and I am still cautious. Both can be true. What would you choose in my place? Would you speak if it risked Liam? Gavin finishes his coffee, rinses the cups, and leaves the kitchen cleaner than he found it. Liam curls against his side on the couch with the gift unwrapped, safe enough to be loud. I close the door after them, and the sound is different from before. It is not a lock against danger. It is a seal around warmth. If this story moved you, please like, share, and comment. Who would you trust and why?